Welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, Episode 11. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons, and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. And today we're talking about sex demons and spirits with deviant tastes. And I'm going to present a different perspective about what draws these specific energy beings to people and why. Now, I must state before we get into this topic that if the contents of this episode trigger you mentally or emotionally, please see your doctor, counsellor, or any other mental health professional. I'm sharing this information to educate the public about a topic that most people avoid. And my long-term career in energy work, especially with the paranormal entities, gives me privy to the intimate lives of these energy beings and what they're thinking and why they act in certain ways. If you like the content of this podcast and don't want to miss any future episodes, please subscribe. And you can also share with your friends and get that message out there about these paranormal tricksters in our environment. I would really appreciate it. Now, normally I would share the stories first, as I do with all my other podcast episodes. But I really thought it was important that I share the information first today, so you have some background understanding about the contents of the stories and how it can relate to people's lives. Now, these energy beings have also been known as incubus or succubus energies and are documented throughout history as terrorizing people as they sleep. And this is a very sensitive topic, but I feel it is essential to mention these energy beings in my paranormal podcast, as I have seen their effects on my clients with emotional issues of a sexual nature. Now, just as other dark energy beings are attracted to feed off similar vibrations as themselves, such as paranoia, hatred, or fear, so do the sexual entities. They are attracted to people with intense negative emotions around self-worth, self-esteem, and self-value in the sexual areas of their lives. They may have experienced sexual humiliation or abuse, or been mentally or emotionally disturbed by viewing explicit pornography, or been physically exposed to deviant sexual practices. And these traumatizing experiences can create deep negative emotional imprints, such as low self-worth, shame, guilt, remorse, disgust, fear, helplessness, or humiliation, for example. And when there is a large build-up of these emotions over a long period of time, it puts out a vibration into our environment, which then attracts these specific dark energy beings. But please note, don't go into fear over what I've just said. Not everyone who experiences issues of a sexual nature will attract these types of dark entities. It depends on the individual person's mental and emotional strength, their level of emotional vulnerability, and their resilience to overcoming these sorts of obstacles through seeking mental health care. And it can also depend on the types of mental or emotional triggers that can bring up these particular issues around sexuality. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the build-up of long-term negative emotions around sexuality. Now let's delve into our first story. I call this one The Spirit Stalker. And it is the most recent experience that one of my clients had, but I also had this experience as well. And you'll understand as we get into the story. Now, I'm going to share with you a true tale of stalking, sexual desire, loneliness, and shame in life as in death for this one particular spirit. Now, a little background information first, so you understand the possibly challenging perspective being presented today. When people pass from their physical bodies into spirit form, they maintain their thoughts, emotions, mental states and behaviours, even in spirit, when they are still present within the earth realm. These aspects within the soul can only be addressed and healed when the soul energy has crossed the threshold into the afterlife. Now, the story I'm about to tell you came firstly from a client's long-term personal experience with this person while they were still living. And then I'm going to share my very own brief interaction with the same particularly deviant person in spirit form who arrived in my bedroom very late one night. Now, I'm going to call this spirit Jamie to protect his identity. Jamie was what I would describe as a sexual predator during his lifetime. And my client, who we're going to call Kay, withstood many associated stalker behaviours and interactions with Jamie, who was totally obsessed with her. He would text Kay constantly and ring her at all hours of the day and night, and also filling her email box with constant messaging. Thankfully for Kay, he lived on the other side of the world, so she was saved from having to deal with personal interactions with this person. Now, Kay managed to eventually block him from all her technology. And then one day, Jamie suddenly passed away from a heart attack. And Kay was very open in her psychic sensing and was a little bit worried, actually more than a little bit worried, that Jamie, now in spirit form, would continue his barrage of sexual innuendo. But it would be worse, because he could visit and intimidate her in her own home whenever he wanted. She quickly set up creating a spiritual boundary around her home and herself, and asked her spirit guides for what she called a spiritual protector, who would patrol her home like a security guard, keeping away any undesirables day and night for as long as necessary. Now, during our conversations to do a house clearing for Kay, she'd mentioned this issue with Jamie, and I noted down some details as we chatted one night. I was to do the paranormal house clearing for Kay over the next few days, and she wanted me to check and see if Jamie was present in her home. And as I performed the energy clearing work, I checked many times, asking with my pendulum, is Jamie present within the property? Is Jamie present within the house? And I didn't detect his presence in her home at all. And I have to tell you that Kay was most relieved. She was very excited that her request for a spiritual protector had actually been granted, and that she actually felt safe from this intruder entering into her home. Now, this is where the story gets even more interesting. Jamie had been observing and listening to our conversations, and he'd picked up on my energy through the psychic connection that I create when I tune into a property to do an energy clearing. And he felt that he had the right to enter my home later that night and see if I was open to his advances. Now, I've learnt over the many decades that I've been doing this work, I will diligently check my home after an energy clearing many times before I go to bed, because there's always some sneaky beings who are cunning and they will try and hide in the house, or they'll bide their time outside the house until I go to sleep, if they feel a little bit disgruntled about having been removed from a property. Even though it's done respectfully, some of them still get upset. Now, what Jamie did is that he was outside the boundary of my home. So around 11 p.m, I get into bed, really exhausted after a busy day. And I quietly lay on my right side as normal, thinking about the day's work and what was coming up for the next day. And I kind of slowly and peacefully start to drift off to sleep, when I suddenly feel a very sharp thud on the bed. Now, I don't react, but instead instantly go into my usual verbal response for dark beings coming into my bedroom for help. And I just say to them, please wait outside the house till morning, and when I get up, I will help you. So as I was saying this, my eyes were wide open, and I just observed the darkness around me and listened for any movements. There was silence in the room for maybe 5 minutes. And then the heavy, sharp thuds started again, as if taunting me to respond. These are some of the games that these dark energy beings will play. Well, I actually thought it was a dark energy being, but it wasn't in this instance. And you'll understand how I know why when I share the rest of this. I shut my eyes and I just decided to ignore them. A few minutes go by and I suddenly feel a shift in the bed covers and this very sly movement up behind me, as if someone was snuggling up closely. Now my eyes flew open and I asked whoever it was to leave my house in a very firm, commanding voice. Like seriously, I was tired. It was nearly midnight and I'm like, I need to get to sleep. Please leave my home. But there was no change. Now, the snuggling turned into slow touching. And then these rather uncomfortable tickling movements that became more focused on areas of my body that are off limits to others. I think you get the idea of where I'm talking about. Now, I instantly sit up and I'm in a huff now. Like my patience was at 0. And I loudly address whoever it is in my bedroom to leave now. I know you're here. You are not welcome. Sometimes I get these shenanigans after a job. It is just part of the work that I do. And I just have to be firm but hopefully respectful so that they get the message. Now, everything went silent and I settled down to sleep again. This time, laying on my back. I thought, right, whoever that is, no snuggling, I'm going to lay on my back. So I was woken. I was woken 4 times during the night with pressure on top of my body. And I had really horrible nightmarish dreams. Like in my dreams, I saw a presence in my house. Not of the dark kind, but a wavering, shimmering shape that had devious intentions on its mind. And I heard this voice that said very clearly, "You can't stop me." Now it was 5 a.m, so I decided to get up. I was tired, so I sort of dragged my feet out of bed and I just walked around the house, just rubbing my eyes and like, oh my God, I am so tired. Whatever it was had left the house, and the house was really still. So 9 a.m. that morning, I sat at my kitchen table, eyes closed, sipping a rather large glass of water and thinking about piecing together who this energy was and how to keep it out of my house. Now, sometimes it can be hard work to work out who these energetic intruders are, as I have so many coming and going from my house on a daily basis. But because of the close proximity to this recent house clearing job with Kay and her stalker spirit, I wondered if this meandering spirit had transferred to me, possibly thinking that I would be an easy target. Now, after some dowsing detective work, as I call it, this deviant nighttime visitor was indeed the same spirit who had been harassing my recent client, Kay. And in his mind, he thought that he could have twice the fun. And he had no regard for us in any way. I had not experienced this from a spirit before. This was totally new for me. Generally, spirits will be attached to properties where they've lived or their family members, or they don't know how to cross to the light and they'll come to you for help. I have never, ever had to deal with a deviant energy with sexual desires before. So this is why I can explain it to you in such detail, is because I experienced this myself. So I know this stuff is real. So I set to work with management, as I call them, which is my spiritual support network, on some strategies to keep him away from me and out of the house. So we set up what I call the angelic guards, or the angelic bodyguards, who were present in my bedroom of a night time, and I managed to actually sleep more peacefully. Now, I have a lot of empathy for people, for spirits, for dark and demonic beings, because they always do what they're doing for a particular reason. So in my mind, I did wonder what had driven Jamie to become this spiritual sexual stalker. The mere thought of him brought his energy closer, and I wondered, was he lonely? Was he seeking attention? And had his sexual behaviours come from his own negative experiences when he was alive? Now, Jamie hung around my property during the day for around another week. He would observe me. He would observe my work. And you're going to ask, how do I know that? Is that I would feel a shift in my energy. I'm very, very energetically sensitive to environmental changes. So I know when there's dark or demonic beings in the house. I know generally when there's spirits in the house or my spirit guides are present. But Jamie had this particular vibration that he's putting out. I can't think of the words, the way to describe it. It felt sad. He felt sad. He felt lost. Now, every time I felt him close, I would ask, "Do you need help?" And he would just refuse and just move back out into the distance again. Until one evening, after I'd finished the day's energy work, and I felt him enter my kitchen. Now, this time his energy was different. He didn't come running at me and groping, and he wasn't being disrespectful. He stood silently, watching me near my kitchen door. It was almost like he was waiting to be asked into the property. And I did this time. I said, "Jamie, is there something that I can help you with? Please come in." So I asked him again, "Do you need help?" He said yes. It's like his energy had gone from being very provocative and very demanding, and that sort of sexual vibe he was putting out. He'd actually really relaxed. I think that he'd recognised that his behaviours were inappropriate, that he was being disrespectful, and that I wasn't going to back down. Jamie didn't understand death, and that he'd actually died really suddenly. He thought that he wouldn't be accepted into heaven because of his negative lifestyle choices and actions and behaviours. So he continued to live in the only way that he knew. Finding someone who works respectfully with all types of energy beings had seriously challenged him at first. But slowly over that week, his thinking had changed from being challenged to being accepting. Now, I did some dowsing work with Jamie, and I identified that he had a large build-up of shame, guilt, worthless and unworthy within him. He said to me that he had carried those emotions with him since he was between 6 and 8 years old. And the release of those negative energetic imprints actually allowed him to feel free, light, unencumbered by his life that he was now ready to leave behind. And he was so ready to accept the next step in his spiritual journey, I suppose you could call it. So that evening, through free will, Jamie surrendered to the light and he transitioned into the afterlife. Now, when I look back at this experience, I believe that we meet certain people in our lives for a reason. And I feel that I was meant to meet Kay, to then meet Jamie, and to be able to assist him in seeing the light. Now let's move into our second story, which I have called The Nightly Visitor. Now, I received a call from a very softly spoken middle-aged lady who we're going to call Penny. Now, Penny was experiencing what she could only describe as a nightly visitor. And at first she was shocked and somewhat frightened by the invisible presence in her bedroom and her bed. But the energy being didn't hurt her. She found it was more comforting in ways that Penny hadn't experienced in a very long time. And Penny told me that she was under the care of a psychologist for sexual trauma and low self-esteem issues, and the treatment helped somewhat, but she felt there was more to her problem. Penny wanted to try a different approach, and she hadn't experienced energy work before, but was willing to give it a go to see if we could explore the energetic side of her specific problem. Now, Penny confided in me that there was a distinct lack of intimacy in her life. She'd been living a single lifestyle for decades. And when she did have intimate relationships, the men were always abusive and self-satisfying, leaving her feeling empty and lonely. And Penny passionately wished for someone to be close to her. Now, this long-term vibration that she created with these pent-up feelings attracted an energy being who felt her desperate, energetic needs for sensual satisfaction. So this energy being came to provide what Penny needed. Now, Penny was embarrassed and ashamed at first, but she confided in me that as much as the visitor, as she called him, satisfied her, she longed for the physical human side of sex. So we set to slowly clearing her bank of stored emotional imprints around self-worth, loneliness, and intimacy. And over a 2-month period, she started to feel better about herself, mentally, emotionally, and physically. She said her thought patterns had changed in a positive, uplifting way. And she didn't feel lost and lonely anymore. Her self-worth had come back, and she was focusing on her vices, not her faults. Penny had also continued to see her psychologist, who was impressed with her mental and emotional improvements. Within the 6 months of this amazing, self-fulfilling turnaround for Penny, she'd attracted a loving, caring, living partner, someone with whom she was an equal and absolutely adored her. She blushed as she told me how he lavished her with love, and they fulfilled each other's needs and desires in all aspects of life. Penny had solved her paranormal problem of this nightly visitor by facing her fears and her personal needs head on. With professional psychological help and energy clearing, she'd released all her emotional baggage from decades, and she'd moved on with her life, and she was living in a more positive mindset. Penny told me that she is now excited about her future with her loving partner, and she's not felt the presence of the nightly visitor again. Now, story number 3 is from Angela, who wanted to share this story with everyone about her experience with deeply hidden emotions coming to the surface, deeply hidden traumas coming to the surface in a most unusual way. This story is called The Memory. Angela snuggled down on the couch one night with a hot drink and a snack. She was tired after a busy day and wanted to watch a new movie which she'd found while scouring through the aisles of a local opportunity shop. Now, the cover imagery of angels in the city caught her attention, and the back cover described the movie as an intellectual thriller. Now, the movie started out harmlessly enough, as most psychological thrillers do, until one scene struck instant fear and panic into Angela's mind and body. She said she was munching away on her favourite snack, and in an instant she nearly choked on her popcorn as she gasped in a huge breath. The movie scene was set in a dark park, and as a woman was suddenly and violently grabbed and thrown up against a tree, Angela's mind started spinning. She didn't want to watch this scene, but she couldn't take her eyes off the screen. She felt pain all through her body as a very distant memory rose from inside her, and she saw herself as the person being assaulted in the movie. A little bit of backstory here. In Angela's 20s, she had indeed been sexually assaulted. The memory of it was so traumatising that she'd buried it deep within her mind, as she was too ashamed to speak of it to anyone, and she just got on with her life. Now, in her 40s, the thought of what had happened to her sent her mind reeling. Why did I buy this movie? Angels! There's no angels in this movie. What a horrible movie, she yelled out loud. Angela was angry and ashamed, and she threw the TV remote against the wall as she rose from the couch and went to bed, clutching a box of tissues. Angela said her mind was spinning all night as she restlessly rolled from side to side. And around 3 a.m, she felt a movement on her bed, and her eyes shot open. With no partner or pets in her unit, what was causing the shifting in the bed covers? She sat up in the darkness and could see the faint outline of the chair and the wardrobe in her bedroom, but there was no one in the room or on the bed. So she lay down again, and as she lay down, she felt something delicately stroking her hair and running its hand down her back. Now, too scared to move this time, she lay there observing what was happening. Was she going crazy? Or was she awake in a dream? Ow! No, she thought, as she pinched herself, and it hurt. After 5 minutes or so, the gentle touching suddenly stopped, and there was no more movements on the bed. Angela was so tired after her traumatising night that she just slowly drifted off into sleep. She woke at 8 a.m. with a start, running late for work, and she shot out of bed and thought no more about the night before. Now we're going to skip forward to the next night. And here is Angela snuggling into bed again, and at 3 a.m. on the dot, she is suddenly woken again by the gentle touching from the invisible presence. It's touching her hair, touching her back, her arms, the front of her body. This time Angela spoke out. "I'm trying to sleep here. Stop touching me, please, and leave my house." The caressing stopped, and Angela waited. Nothing. And then she slowly drifted off to sleep again. At around 5:30 a.m, her dreams became restless, and she woke in a panic as she felt increasing pressure on her chest. Something was lying on top of her. She couldn't breathe properly, and with her eyes wide open, she looked frantically from side to side as her brain was searching for a solution to this debilitating pressure. Angela had lived through many traumas over the years and learnt to use her voice as a weapon. With all the power in her voice that she could summon, she yelled, "Get off me and get out of my house!" She jolted her body's weight around and waved her arms like a madwoman. She had stunned whatever was in the bedroom. And she now clambered off the bed. Standing trembling in the corner of her room, she yelled again, "Get out of my house!" The sun was now coming up, and Angela went to the kitchen bleary-eyed and made a cuppa. She sat at her small table and thought to herself, I've got to talk to someone about this. I can't keep going on like this. Angela rang a friend who was a hypnotherapist and also booked an appointment to see her psychologist that afternoon. In the following days that led into the next 2 weeks, Angela brought her deepest, darkest secret to the surface. She told of the shame, the humiliation, and the low self-value she'd carried for those 20 years after being sexually assaulted. By working through her pain, she released the emotional build-up from her mind and body, and the visits from the body-stroking comforter stopped. Angela said that as frightening as those 2 weeks were, with the nightly visits from the invisible presence who wanted to comfort her in more ways than one, she knew it didn't want to hurt her, more so offer her comfort in a way that it felt she needed. Angela now doesn't get visits from that energy being anymore. She is still single, but she is single and happy. She's moved on with her life. She said to me that she changed her job. She's started a hobby. She's doing more exercise. She's filling her life with fulfilling actions, fulfilling activities. And she's actually grateful for that movie that came into her life. And she's grateful for the fact that this energy being brought to her the need to get help. I know it sounds strange, it sounds a little bit crazy, but by the presence of that energy being in her home, it actually made her get help. Otherwise, she may have just buried the trauma and the sense of shame and humiliation again and never actually dealt with it. So in episode 12, we're talking demonic beings and your dreams. Demonic beings love to get inside our heads when they think that we're unaware of their intentions and their devilish dream tactics. But I'm onto them, and I'm going to share some signs and symptoms of dark energy interference that I have experienced myself, and other people I have talked to have also experienced some similar signs. And I'm also going to share a story or two. So I look forward to seeing you then. And don't forget to send me your paranormal questions and stories you'd love to share with the world. Email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. See the description box for the web address. I look forward to sharing this spooky space with you again next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.